Welcome to this first Eurogroup press conference after the summer break. Let me start by thanking the Italian presidency for their hospitality and commend Piercarlo Padoan and his people for the excellent organization here in Milan. We had a fruitful Eurogroup meeting to which we welcomed our new Austrian colleague, Hans-Jörg Schelling, and the Lithuanian Minister of Finance, Rimantas Stasys, who will attend the Eurogroup meetings as an observer before adopting the euro on the 1st of January 2015. The most important issues we discussed today are the economic situation, tax burden reducing reforms in euro area countries, and developments in a number of member states. The euro area has entered into a new phase, and our focus has shifted from ensuring financial stability to supporting growth. And we all agree that the euro area needs to increase its growth potential and create more jobs. Now, to underscore low growth and subdued inflation environment, underscores the need for decisive and sound policy actions by all stakeholders. In this respect, we took note of the monetary policy measures adopted by the ECB on the 4th of September, and we think that monetary policy needs to be complemented by a strong and credible mix of fiscal policy, structural reforms, and investment. And this is a clear responsibility of the member states as well as the collective of Eurozone countries. Investments will be a key issue tomorrow at tomorrow's ECOFIN meeting, where we will discuss several proposals that are on the table for increasing investment and supporting growth in jobs. Now, there is a broad consensus, the most broad as possible consensus, that the Stability and Growth Pact serves as an anchor of confidence in the European Union. And there is a clear sense of responsibility that the credibility of the pact that we regained through hard work during the course of the crisis needs to be preserved. And therefore we all agreed that we would stick to the rules. The growth-friendly consolidation strategy should continue, and any form of flexibility should of course be within the existing rules. At the same time, we need to accelerate the implementation of our ambitious structural reform agenda to improve the competitiveness of our economies and to boost growth and employment. We cannot solely rely on monetary policy, but need the appropriate policy mix in order to have a lasting positive impact on our growth potential. We will continue working on this policy mix over the coming months and in detail when we discuss the euro area member states' draft budgetary plans in November. This brings me to the second topic on our agenda, the coordination of structural reforms. I cannot stress enough the importance of structural reforms at this critical juncture. Structural reforms in our economies can only be addressed structural problems in our economies can only be addressed through structural reforms which increase our growth potential and structural employment, which is not only in the countries but also in our joint interest as a monetary union. As structural reforms require time and affect vested interests, political courage and perseverance is needed. You will recall that at the July Eurogroup meeting, we launched a new process on the coordination of structural reforms. And the Eurogroup is determined to act as a driver for this program of structural reforms and help member states carrying out these reforms. It is clear we have to prepare our labor and product markets for the 21st century. At our July meeting, we started our work in this area with a first exchange on views on how to reduce the tax burden on labor. 11 euro area countries received a recommendation on this issue, and reducing the tax burden on labor is one of the key reforms that will help our economies become more competitive. Today we took this work further and agreed on a set of common principles. We've summarized today's discussion in a statement that was distributed, or will be distributed to you Let me go through the main points. We agreed that tax burden reducing reforms should be targeted at those components and interest groups that face the greatest challenges, which may differ, of course, across member states. Secondly, the reform measures should be properly financed and take the member states' fiscal margin of maneuver into account. They should be accompanied by reductions in non-productive public expenditure and a shift to taxes that are less detrimental to growth. The positive effects of reducing the tax burden can only materialize in well-functioning labor markets, which may require a broader set of labor market reforms. As the implementation of labor tax reforms may impact income distribution, consultation with all relevant stakeholders is desirable to attain the necessary political and social support. We will take stock of where we stand on this topic when we discuss the draft budgetary plans this autumn, and in spring next year we will return to this issue when we discuss the implementation of the recommendations addressed to the euro area on the issue. There was also a call for developing a benchmark to see what progress we make on the issue, and we have invited the Commission to do some preparatory work on that. Later this year, we will, in the Eurogroup, put on our agenda the coordination of reforms regarding investments as well as service markets. That brings me to a couple of countries that we specifically discussed. First of all, Ireland. The Irish colleague, Michael Noonan, briefly informed us of his government's intention to repay early a significant part of the IMF loans to Ireland, received in the course of its successful adjustment program. There was broad political support in the Eurogroup opening up procedures, national procedures required in member states for granting the waiver for the EFSF part, and we mandated the Euro Working Group to take forward this issue in the next months. Of course, the issue will also be discussed in tomorrow's ECOFIN, given that Ireland at the time received not only EFSF loans, but also from EFSM and bilateral loans, and there has to be general agreement from the different creditors to start the process. But in the Eurogroup, there was general support to open up the procedures. On Cyprus, the Troika debriefed us on the main findings of the fifth review. We welcomed and complimented the considerable progress made by the Cypriot authorities. However, we understand that due to the latest amendments introduced by Parliament, there is one important pending issue in the current review. It relates to the legal framework for private debt restructuring, which is an essential part of the next steps to be taken. We call on all domestic stakeholders to assume their responsibility and ensure that the adequate foreclosure and insolvency legislation is in place as soon as possible, in line with the MOU. And once the Troika institutions confirm that the required prior action have been successfully completed, we can proceed with the disbursement of the next tranche. Finally, on Greece, we were informed on the state of play of the Greek adjustment program ahead of the fifth review, which is scheduled to start before the end of this month. Troika institutions and the Greek authorities had useful discussions in Paris to prepare the ground for this review. And once the findings of this review become clear, the Eurogroup will return to the issue and start also to discuss a number of interrelated issues, such as the arrangements to be put in place once the current program expires, which is at the end of the year, as you know. That's all for my introduction.
Thank you, Sharon. Nice to be here again after a few years. Last time when I was in Eurogroup meeting, Jean-Claude Juncker was the president of Eurogroup, and as I have got used to follow him wherever he wants to go, we both would like to start our work in the European Commission if the European Parliament allows. As Sharon has already told, the issues what we discuss about, I would like to focus on a few, actually 3 issues which are important when chasing better economic growth and jobs. First, we need to accelerate on structural reforms. Without real reforms effectively implemented, we will not have sustainable growth and job creations. No country is immune from the need to reform. Our challenge is how to use the existing economic governance framework more efficient way to support the adoption and implementation of structural reforms by member states. The second, we need to ensure sustainable fiscal policies while improving the quality of public spending. When money is tight, there is little choice but to make savings, but there is always a choice as to how to make those savings. Reducing expenditure rather than raising taxes and cutting current expenditure rather than future-oriented investments can ensure that fiscal consolidation is growth-friendly. Our fiscal rules allow for some flexibility, provided the economic case for adjusting targets can be made. Flexibility should be granted because it makes economic sense, not for any other reasons. And the application of flexibility should not in any way undermine the credibility of our fiscal framework. And third, we must support investment, both public and private. We can work at both national but also in European levels. At national level, countries with large current account surpluses should commit to invest more. And all countries should prioritize investments in research and development and key infrastructures. At European level, the extra public resources will be mobilized should be used in particular to draw in more private investment. I know that this will be a guiding principle underpinning the 300 billion investment plan announced by President-elect Juncker, which will be prepared in the coming months. At the same time, we need to ask ourselves what is holding back private investments in Europe. We need to ensure the business climate and regulatory environment is favorable to companies investing in the future, innovating, developing new markets and creating new jobs. Just very briefly about the 300 billion package, which is not, of course, ready because the new Commission has not started, but I have been thinking that there should be at least 2 parts. The first part is the public part, how we could spend more efficient way public resources and public funds in order to finance investments, for instance. And the other part is the area in which we have to devise how to create better internal market, single market for various industries. And the latter part is even more challenging than the first part because we have to find right tools, right obstacles, and right answers in order to create better single market, for instance, for digital products. I'm looking forward to constructive discussions on all these issues tomorrow at the informal ECOFIN and to hearing the views of all the ministers around the table about these common challenges. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. A few points from the EFSF, ESM perspective. On the first point that was on the agenda this morning in the Eurogroup, let me just add that from my frequent contacts with investors around the world, I know that they are very impressed by the progress in the 5 countries that have borrowed from EFSF and ESM, so the 5 program countries. And markets are also impressed by the stronger coordination framework that we put in place over the last few years. However, there's no room for complacency, also from that side. Investors are watching carefully that the agreed rules are actually fully implemented and that structural reforms happen in all countries. On the countries we discussed this morning, on Ireland, let me just add that I welcome the Irish initiative for the very simple reason that it will strengthen the Irish debt sustainability, and that is to the benefit of other large creditors like the EFSF. And I hope that the necessary national procedures required in some member states will be concluded successfully. On Cyprus, we are ready to disburse very soon 350 million euro. This could happen in early October, but as the chairman said, it depends on all prior actions being in place. On Greece, we disbursed 1 billion euro in the middle of August. Now there remains available 1.8 billion euro from the EFSF and another 1.8 billion from SMP profits. But of course, this will only be made available when the fifth review has been successfully concluded. Let me say a few words now on our funding activities, as I sometimes do. I haven't done it in a while. We can only disburse money when we are successful in the markets, as you know. The EFSF has already issued this year 33 billion euro in bonds, and the ESM another 10 billion euro. For the rest of this year, EFSF and ESM intend to issue another 8 to 9 billion. We are using the full spectrum of maturities. At the very short end, 3 and 6 months bills, they are now negative interest rates for us, like for other top-rated issuers. And very recently, we also issued our longest bond ever, a 30-year bond, 4 billion, very successful. With all these activities, we are the fifth largest issuer in euro after Germany, France, Italy, and Spain. Thank you.
The ECB was, following the assessment made by the Commission, was also asked to comment about the current economic situation and the prospects. And we observed, as we've done in the last press conference in Frankfurt, that the second quarter has seen a growth stalling after 4 quarters of recovery. We still think the recovery will proceed at a modest pace. As I said many times, the recovery is fragile, uneven, and weak, but we see it continuing. Following our view, our outlook, medium-term outlook for inflation, we've taken a series of monetary policy decisions in the last 2 meetings. And the ones that have been announced in September have been taken with a view to underpinning the anchoring of medium and long-term inflation expectations, in line with our aim to keep inflation close but below 2%. As you know, inflation was 3% in 2012, and now is 0.4%. And in the month of August, inflation expectations have declined across all maturities. So we have a certain measures of inflation expectations, and the ones we use have declined, though they are still just below 2%. So that's why we decided, after the decision taken in June with the targeted long-term refinancing operations, we launched 2 purchase programs to effectively complement the TLTROs in enhancing the functioning of monetary policy transmission and in providing further monetary accommodation, given that we have now reached the lower bound with our interest rates. So the new measures, together with the TLTRO, will have a sizable impact on our balance sheet, which is expected to move towards the size it used to have at the beginning of 2012. And the Governing Council stands ready to take further action if needed in compliance with its mandate to maintain price stability. But only if structural, fiscal, and monetary policies go hand in hand will the euro area see investment return, investment that is needed for fostering growth and creating new jobs. And if I can say, one of the key points of the meeting today was the stress on structural reforms. To see investment return, we need more ambitious structural reforms. And this was, by and large, touched by all the speakers with the universal agreement. And against the urgent need for more structural reforms, countries should address the European Union 2014 country-specific recommendations in a determined manner. This is very important because no matter what the monetary and even fiscal stimulus is being decided, we won't see much growth coming from these measures only if there are no serious structural reforms. Let me say one word on the fiscal consolidation. We shouldn't forget the past with the serious fiscal imbalances and the comprehensive fiscal consolidation that has taken place over recent years in many member countries has certainly reduced the historically high budgetary imbalances in the euro area. As the President of the Eurogroup, the Vice President of the Commission have said, this should not be unraveled. And we should remember that the Stability and Growth Pact has acted as an anchor of confidence. I have commented on fiscal policies in previous speeches, and so I stand ready to answer questions on this, and especially on monetary policy, of course. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you. I'm from Bloomberg. I have one single question for Mr. Dijsselbloem and Mr. Katainen, and one separate question for Mr. Draghi, for the two gentlemen in the middle. On the Cypriot question, what are the prospects of solving the foreclosure law problems that you have with the Cypriot government at the moment? Did you get any indication in today's meeting that this can be done in time to prevent a delay to the next payment for Cyprus? I'd appreciate a comment on that. Thank you. And for Mr. Draghi.
Yeah, speak up, because I don't hear you.
We don't hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little.
How important is the presence of government guarantees on, for the mezzanine tranches of your ABS program important for the success of that program? And can you give us a figure on the overall size of this program? Thank you.
On the first issue, I think it's more appropriate for the Commission to go into that, being part of the Troika. The first question being, I'm just repeating so everyone understands, what are the opportunities to deal with the problem which still is there in Cyprus on the next legal issue?
Okay. First, I would like to say that Cyprus is doing a good job in a sense that it is meeting fiscal target with a very comfortable margin. Structural reforms are advancing. There's been also important progress towards further recapitalization of the banks. But we also know that there is a problem with that some parts of legislation adopted by the Cypriot Parliament, together with the foreclosure bill, that is not compatible with the program's requirements in this important policy area. We are now waiting for the Cypriot authorities to clarify how they intend to proceed. Foreclosure reform is very essential. It is key to enabling banks to start providing lending needed to finance economic recovery in Cyprus.
On your second question, the IBS program will be launched regardless of whether there are guarantees or not, because it will be addressed as far as ABS are concerned, to the senior tranches. It can be expanded into the so-called mezzanine tranches if there will be a guarantee by member states. Incidentally, these guarantees are already being issued by some governmental agencies in some member states. And this will be oriented, and has been oriented like it is in the United States, by the way. There are SMEs financing programs that are being guaranteed by the government, and there are SMEs financing programs already that are being publicly guaranteed in some member states. So that is that's the second. In the meantime, and independently, there will be some, I think I'm confident, there will be some regulatory evolution in the way ABS of a certain type are treated. And that will also contribute to make the market deeper and broader. On the size, there are three quite complex measures taking off the ground at the same time. We have the TLTROs, we have the program, the ABS purchase program, and we have the covered bonds program purchase. By the way, incidentally, the covered bond program is not a novelty, it's not new. It's the third such a program that the ECB will launch. It has already launched 2 of them. And the finalities, the reasons, the objectives, the goals of this program are completely different from the previous program's objectives. So it's very hard to come out with the size. We'll be in a much better position to judge the overall size, which is going to be significant. We know that. And we had examined several numbers, and some of them have appeared in the press as well. But then in the end, we preferred not to be focused on one figure, because the 3 programs are complex, they are big, and they interact between each other. So the size, we know it's going to be big, but we hesitate to make a number now.
The gentleman over here, and then the lady there. Please try to keep it to one question. Yes,
one topic. Peter Spiegel from the Financial Times. I'd like to stick with the ABS program if I could and ask both President Dijsselbloem and President Draghi about it. Subsequent to your advocacy for state-backed guarantees to the mezzanine tranche of the ABSs, the French and the German government came out and said they do not support public guarantees. Were you disappointed by that? And if the 2 largest Eurozone governments are not going to move forward with that, does that make any hope of a sizable guarantee scheme impossible? And for President Dijsselbloem, I'd like to ask you, particularly since the Netherlands is one of these countries that has a sizable housing debt on the books of a lot of your banks. Is the Netherlands, do you personally and the Dutch government in general support state guarantees for those more risky levels of the ABS asset-backed securities? Thank you.
Thank you. As I said, the program is primarily oriented to the purchase of senior tranches. Only if it's going to be extended into the mezzanine tranches, there will be need of guarantees. So it's been formulated to take off the ground without considering mezzanine at the very beginning. It certainly is going to be much more effective for facilitating credit expansion with also the mezzanine component, that's for sure. And for that, we'll need a guarantee. And it isn't clear that that provision will be important in determining the final volume of guarantees that we'll see in this market, because other countries may well decide differently. Thank you.
The question to me was asked in my capacity as Minister of the Netherlands, correct? Just to make sure. If I understand the program correct, it's non-discriminatory, it's open to all countries and all financial institutions. So it could also be open to Dutch banks. And on your question, do I support additional guarantees from the government on these products, the answer would be no.
Annette Weisbach, CNBC. I have 2 questions for Mr. Draghi. So the first one is, what are you reckoning, when will the ABS and the covered bond program actually bear fruits?
I'm sorry, where?
When do you think? how long will it take until the new unconventional measures by the ECB actually will really bear fruits? And also, do you think, is that a game changer now? Do you believe that European politicians are now really eager to go for structural reforms? Because we have been talking about structural reforms for such a long time. Do you feel that this time it's different?
Well, I think the second question should be addressed to my two neighbors here, really, rather than me. It's quite clear, and it's been clear even in today's meeting, that the effect of monetary and fiscal policies is much bigger if a proper structural reform ground has been laid out than in absence of reforms. That's quite clear, and there is so much so that people are speaking of a reform dividend. And so in terms of the monetary policy measures, they'll be launched in October, and there will be 2 tranches for the TLTROs, one in the end of September, if I'm not mistaken, and the other one in December. And then there will be quarterly operations with the TLTROs for the next 2 years. And the same thing with purchase of ABS, and the same thing with covered bond program. So it will all start between now and year end. All 3 programs will be launched.
The lady in blue there.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought you were ready.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
The lady in blue.
Hi, I'm Anne Bauer from Les Echos in France. You didn't mention the discussion about France, and I think that the French minister probably gave you some explanation about the fiscal situation of France. Could you tell us what is your comprehension of the situation of our country? Thank you.
I don't know who the question was to, but you didn't specify to whom you asked the question. But I take it I could say something on it, if that's all right with you. Actually, today we didn't specifically discuss the French budget, which we don't yet have. The draft budget will be sent to the Commission first in October, and then, of course, on the basis of the Commission's assessment, we will come back to it specifically. Of course, the French colleague made public a number of figures of the economic situation and the budgetary implications for France, and I think we all took note of that, but we didn't discuss them in that detail today. What we did discuss is where we stand economically, what that means for the policy mix, what that means for national responsibilities as well as Eurozone collective responsibilities. And I'd just like to stress also in response to your question, which was, is this time different? First of all, a lot of work has been done, particularly by those countries who were hit hardest by the crisis and were supported in a program, but also by a number of other countries who've done major work in reforms, and I think that needs to be underlined. Having said that, I think we also, all of us realized, and I mean all of us in the Eurogroup, that any impulse coming from the monetary side or even an impulse coming from fiscal policy will only have an enduring, a lasting effect if we deal with structural underlying issues. And they differ per country, and some issues are relevant for a large group of countries, but they will have to be addressed. And I was very pleased, we were all very pleased, to hear the Commissioner say that they will put a very strong emphasis on that when they judge the plans later this year, the plans coming from the different governments. They will be judged on what progress are we making on structural reforms. Any other elements in the policy mix will not have a lasting effect unless we get the structural issues right.
Yeah, I'll take 2 more. That's the gentleman over there and La Stampa.
Tony Connolly from Irish National Television. Can I ask Mr. Draghi for your reaction to the political agreement, at least, to allow Ireland to replace the IMF loans early? And secondly, on the speed with which the Irish Central Bank is disposing of the bonds that will replace the Anglo-Irish promissory notes. The Irish Finance Minister said that that's a matter for the Irish Central Bank, which is independent and not really a question for the Irish government. Thank you.
Thank you. The ECB reaction was to take note of the decision by the Irish government and of the political agreement. And also was to basically remark that there is a separate discussion on how to handle the legacy of the IBRC in a way that shouldn't raise monetary financing concerns on our side. So that is exactly what the ECB said during the meeting. That's part of the discussion. Thank you.
Amir, it's Marco Zatterin from La Stampa. Amir, it's all right, you'll find me. Nice to see you again. I have a question on flexibility. Having agreed that rules must be respected and that there are margins of flexibility inside the rules and the rules shouldn't be changed, it's not quite clear to me how does it work. Let's assume that a country, let's say Italy, asks for more flexibility. What shall Italy do? How does it work? What's the path to flexibility for a country like Italy or any other country? If you can be clear about this. Thank you.
If I may say something more general, not Italy specific, but more general, Stability and Growth Pact allows flexibility if the situation fulfills the criteria, especially when the country is in excessive deficit procedure. There should be two preconditions to be fulfilled. For instance, if there's an extension of deadline. The first is the evolution of economic situation, and the second is the implementation of effective action to correct the excessive deficit. So the two preconditions must be fulfilled in order to get extensions, or if Commission start to consider even the situation. And so quite a lot can be done, as we have seen from the past, within current set of rules. So at the same time, in this particular moment, it's important not to see situation as a black and white question. It is not really a question of choosing either growth or consolidation. The real world is not that simple. We need a healthy interpretation of fiscal consolidation in order to improve confidence, and at the same time we have to look very carefully at the composition of public spending or expenditures, so that more countries would prioritize future-oriented investments. And then we need reforms which strengthen competitiveness, because this is the biggest problem in Europe at the moment. Our problems are more structural in nature than cyclical, even though there are cyclical features in the current economic situation also. So basically we need both demand and supply. And that's why I was very satisfied for today's discussion here with the ministers, because I understand that this was more or less common understanding.
Giovanna Pancarisca, TG24. One question for Dijsselbloem. Talking about the reform need, don't you think that it could be possible to frame also the reform path into a specific EU control, as you do for the fiscal target? It could be suitable to do it and to develop it in this sense more in the future. And then for President Draghi, if I may in Italian, since we have the translation also, is the ECOFIN, the Eurogroup inside the Italian semester. Presidente Draghi, lei ha ricordato l'importanza di rispettare il patto di stabilità e crescita, perché questo dà fiducia ai mercati, ma quando lei dice questo, guardando anche la congiuntura economica, basta rimanere, per esempio, le faccio un esempio pratico, al di sotto del 3% o è necessario puntare anche al pareggio di bilancio e quindi andare a fare correzioni ulteriori dell'indebitamento? Ovviamente glielo chiedo anche alla luce di quanto ieri la stessa Banca Centrale Europea ha detto sullo stato dei conti italiano. Grazie.
Right, if I can pick up on the first question. We have developed over the course of the crisis a very firm and so far very effective fiscal mechanism, which has enabled us, on average, I think this year or next year, to, for the first time, bring the average of the deficits down below -3. And the work done on the deficits, on the fiscal side, is quite impressive. And this has also helped return of market confidence in the Eurozone. So I think we have to be very careful to preserve that confidence. And the pact is, as I quoted, the anchor of the confidence. Structural reforms are necessary to structurally improve our competitiveness. And as the Commissioner says, there is also a connection between the fiscal procedures and mechanisms and the structural reforms. And I think we should even look towards the future to strengthen the connection between these two. For example, also in the preventive arm of the pact. More and more countries are moving from the corrective side to the preventive side. And in that phase, it will become even more important to put the emphasis, as the Commissioner said, to put the emphasis on structural reforms. Having said that, there's no trade-off. We cannot jeopardize the confidence that has come from the fiscal work that we've done, and we must not jeopardize that confidence. So there is a fine balance, and the connection between the two, the fiscal side and the structural reforms, is obvious and can be strengthened even more. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Sì, io devo deluderla perché la risposta è stata già data dal Presidente Dijsselbloem.
Thank you, everybody.